if I may, my name is Greg Horath. I happen to have the pleasure of serving District 19 as the County Board Supervisor. And what we're here for tonight is a public listening session. A session that gives the public the opportunity to ask questions regarding the possibility of a sales tax being incorporated into the business plan for Racine County. One of only 3 counties that does not have one out of 72 in the state of Wisconsin. So we wanted to make sure that we were getting to as many constituents as possible to give them the opportunity to ask questions and maybe better understand what this is about and let us know their thoughts, let us know their reactions and feelings about it. I know that this is now, I believe, Michael, this is the 5th one.
Number 6, actually.
Number 6 that's been held. And there were a couple that were done at the county building. There was also one done in Union Grove. There was one done in Burlington and one done in Norway. And I probably missed something along the way. Caledonia, thank you. And so, by the way, you'll see that our attempt was to make sure that we went ahead and got a good representation around the county when we scheduled these, so we gave people the opportunity to come in and listen and hear what the topic is all about, because obviously it's an important one. What I'd like to do now is we're going to offer some initial information up here, but then it gives the group a chance to ask questions, or I should say, to be in a position for us to listen to what your thoughts are and your ideas are regarding it. I'd like to first of all introduce Mr. Tom Roenhaus. I think most of you know Tom. He is our current interim executive director for Racine County. And Tom, I think you wanted to go ahead and make some introductions as well.
I do, and thank you for all coming. It is with great sorrow that I'm here as the interim county exec. I hope you all had the pleasure of, at some point, meeting Jonathan Delagrave, who passed away June 28th. In my opinion, and all of one of the great leaders, and Racine County was so lucky to have him. So I am sitting in his seat until there's a special election December 19th. And thank you, as Greg said, this is our 6th session. It's a listening session. We want all your valuable comments for a sales tax. As he said, we're one of 3 left. And the fact that it's introduced now was a plan. Jonathan was elected 8 years ago, and I think it was not very long after he was seated in office and got his feet under him, he put together a financial plan, and the introduction of a sales tax was a plan that was drafted at least 7 years ago, given the financial landscape of how government is delivered, whether it's at the federal level, state level, or the county level. If anyone following the news, those funds have slowly been contracted where they didn't keep up with the recession or the inflationary situation, our growth of services, and how we deliver government. Just so you know, Racine County, if there's 10 measuring sticks, Racine County is number 1 in 9 of those 10 in delivering government. We are the best county of the 72. And what's really amazing about that is we're the best county out of 72 without a sales tax. Racine County delivers more government, more services with less people at less cost. And people ask why now? Well, the county should be rewarded for how it's respected the taxpayer and been good stewards of the taxpayer money, because I'll give you an example. Our neighbor to the south, Kenosha County's had a sales tax for 30 years. And last year they generated 20 million, but just for conversation, in 30 years, let's say they averaged $10 million. That means Kenosha County's had $300 million more than us. And we're up here and they're still way down there with $300, with 300 million more dollars. So, this is part of a plan. It's a tool that the state legislature put in effect in 1969, and actually first counties were done in another one, I can't recall the name, in 1988. So there's been counties that's been taking advantage of this financial tool for since 1988. I think that's 38 years. So again, we welcome your input, and let me go ahead and do my introductions. I'm the interim county executive, like we said. This is Tom Kramer, the current county board chairman. Greg, you introduced yourself. This is Michael Lansdorf. He's corporation counsel, which means he's head of our legal department, okay, for the county. And by the way, we are the 5th largest county. We have nearly 200,000 people. So that's Supervisor Bob Miller. Raise your hand, please. I gotta make sure I don't miss anybody. And our wonderful sheriff in our department, Chris Schmaling. And who am I missing? Oh, I'm sorry, Trish. Trish Hansen, our wonderful district attorney, whose office turns out twice as many cases as any of our counterparts. I mean, we're so lucky to have her and the sheriff. So, who wants to go first?
If I may,
Okay.
we should recognize also, we have the Waterford Town Chairman here, Terry Nicolai, how do I, help me out with the last name? Terry Nicolai, thank you. Robert Eulander, also another supervisor from Waterford, and Doug Schwartz, another supervisor from Waterford. So thrilled that you all, oh, I'm sorry, and we have
Adam Jaski, trustee of the Village of Waterford.
Trustee of the village, so thrilled that we have some of the local individuals that obviously are governing our backyard as well, so thank you for being here. Sorry.
And I think, Michael, you want to just give a little introduction?
Yeah, I think I can just frame the discussion a little bit. So again, my name is Michael Lansdorf. I'm Corporation Counsel for Racine County. In that capacity, I also oversee our child support services, our facilities management, and also serve as risk manager for Racine County. You've heard that this is now our 6th of these listening sessions. We've also had 5 public hearings since it was announced that the county was going to be considering enactment of a 0.5% county sales tax. We've got more meetings ahead, including next Tuesday, October 8th, is when the sales tax ordinance will be formally introduced for potential action, with it anticipated that it may be acted upon by our county board on October 24th, just before the final consideration and deliberation of the 2025 budget. So we have a limited amount of time tonight until only 7 p.m. I've got to actually run at 6:45. So what we've been saying at the outset is we're affording each person a maximum of 3 minutes. We don't have stopwatches. We're not going to hold anybody to that necessarily. We want to give everybody opportunity to talk. But what we found by keeping some of the comments somewhat limited is it affords a little bit more opportunity for back and forth, and for it to be a little bit more than just a listening session, but we can actually have a little bit of a discussion and answer some of your questions and concerns. So before I proceed further and we hear from you, I'll just briefly summarize the topic. You heard already that Racine County is one of only 3 counties in the state of Wisconsin without the 0.5% county sales tax. What that means is that unlike those 69 counties that have enacted a 0.5% sales tax, in Milwaukee County and the city of Milwaukee, they actually have the ability under state law to have more than the 0.5% sales tax, but they're the anomaly there. But what it means is that for those 69 other counties, rather than 100% of the entire county tax burden falling squarely on the shoulders of county taxpayers, they get to spread that burden not only amongst the county taxpayers, but also on non-county residents who are coming into their counties, who are buying various services and goods, who are utilizing county services. They're utilizing their roads. They're utilizing in the winter the cleared roads when there's snowfall, and they're clearing that. So naturally, out-of-county residents utilize these county services. So it's only in keeping with that, at least in these 69 other counties, that out-of-county residents would pay some form of their fair share as well. So Racine County, you'll see on a few of the slides, we are facing a $17 million deficit in 2025. The deficit has come as a result of reliance on and depletion of our reserves, and also use of various one-time funding sources, whether that's the American Rescue Plan Act. Racine County received upwards of $38 million of that, and I think did a very good job of not utilizing that solely on operations. We used it for what its intended purpose was, some one-time uses. The construction of a new behavioral health building for people dealing with mental health crisis or substance abuse issues. That's in the works right now, and a big chunk of that funding went towards that project. So the county used that funding wisely so as not to create an even bigger cliff than what we've seen in some other municipalities where they use that one-time money solely for operational purposes. But notwithstanding that, we are facing this $17 million deficit. And so the county executive, our county board, really has two options in dealing with the 2025 budget. Option one, without action on a 0.5% county sales tax, the county would be forced to make significant reductions, significant service cuts, the elimination or unfunding of a vast number of positions in critical service areas that county residents and non-county residents rely upon, whether that's law enforcement, the jail, child welfare, other critical health and human services, highway maintenance, repair, a host of really critical services that the county relies upon would need to be slashed in their funding, and county residents would naturally see that, and it wouldn't take long before they saw the impacts of that. We're talking about upwards of 156 positions that would need to be eliminated or unfunded, and these are across the board drastic service cuts and unfunding of positions. 91 of those positions likely would fall within the sheriff's office, deputies, correctional officers, other critical areas within that office. So $17 million, I find that in talking with people sometimes when you're talking about government, they think, well, $17 million, that's a big number, but it's probably a drop in the bucket for the county. It's not. $17 million represents roughly 1/3 of the general levy. So roughly 1/3 of our county levy that would need to be unfunded in order to balance a budget, which we need to do. So that's option one. Option two is to make prudent cuts, prudent reductions, other belt tightening measures that Racine County has been doing as a matter of course since I've been with the county, upwards 10, 11 years or so. It's to stop the practice of relying upon reserves. It's building back those reserves. It's affording some level of property tax relief, and it's spreading that burden not only from being on the backs of Racine County taxpayers, but also on the out-of-county residents. And there are many, between the marina and our beautiful lakes on the west end, we have a lot of out-of-county residents coming into Racine County utilizing our services, spending money, and there's opportunity to capitalize on that spending in order to sustain and continue these critical county services. Now, to be clear, it is impossible to achieve the goals of option number two without the enactment of a 0.5% county sales tax, and without doing so this year prior to enactment of our county budget. So those are just some of the general points that I wanted to raise before we hear from you, but whether you want to come up to the mic or we're in a small enough room, I think we can all hear each other. If people want to just raise their hands and introduce yourself, and we can get started. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ed Olander. I'm in the Waterford Woods. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, nobody likes to work taxes. Nobody likes taxes, understandably. And of course, that's just part of life, I guess. But some of the questions I have, and you answered, one was Plan B. What was that? And then you stopped there. I don't know if there was a Plan C to get what you need to operate. You seem to focus too about the services, and you hit the sheriff's department, other services. Are there anything else that isn't a first level response service? I'm just gonna throw the questions out. You can answer them in order if you want, because I know we got 3 minutes. The other question I have is the legality of this. We have a vacancy for a supervisor, county supervisor, and that's Mr. Rowenhouse's old position that he resigned from to be interim chair. That person is not absent and that person is not excused. Now you're going to take a vote, and that area, District 18, is not representative. So the old no taxation without representation. It's a legal question whether or not that can be done. Thirdly, I don't know, you brought up Mr. Delagrave, rest in peace, one of the few men or politicians I say that I admired the most. He was very helpful to this community in getting the fire and EMS back on board with the village. But anyways, from what I understand, this was presented again in August, this county sales tax. So somebody said, I don't know if it was Mr. Rowenhouse or you, 7 years ago, that was presented by Mr. Delagrave.
And he said it was presented, it was part of his plan.
Okay, his plan though, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I've never heard of it. I never heard of a county sales tax till just recently. But I don't know when it got instituted and who brought it up again or resurrected it, for lack of any other term. But the other comments I'll make is I listened to the last county supervisory meeting, and I heard stuff like, well, you know, everybody else has got a county tax, we don't. Here's how I look at it, okay? What are they doing wrong? And what has the county been doing right all these years? I look at, I say, poor governing. Another supervisor said, well, you know, we want to welcome people here. We want to show our community that we're frugal, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, why don't you be the gold standard and let everybody else frown upon why they have a county tax? You know, get my point here? You know, it's kind of like, you know, juvenile phrase would be, if they're gonna jump into the lake, are you gonna jump in with them? No, let them join us. So that's the other comment I wanted to make. And then relative to the getting back to the vacancy of District 18, what really puzzles me, and we got village people here, and that area covers it, and Tom knows that area more than anybody, but I'm kind of amazed that I haven't heard anybody from the governing board, the village trustees, or even citizens complaining about they have no representation, no voice as a supervisor. Now, the county did this a few years back with our previous chairman. They had the option to force resignation, he didn't. He was getting paid by the town, he was getting paid by the county, and he was getting paid mileage. He wasn't doing anything. Today, the town is battling this police issue, big time. The village, fire and EMS. I don't know how that started, why, whatever, but I think you have to have representation in place for the people. We need a voice. And we need a voice on this side of what I call the I-94 corridor. Because you guys know yourself, this passes, that money is just gonna be shuffled to the east. Simple as that. We don't require a whole lot out here from the county relative to services, or as I call it again, the 94 corridor. So, my request is push this off till we get a new executive director, let him take on that responsibility. Maybe he could talk you into more money, or the citizens into more money. And that's what I recommend. We should not have an interim, nothing personal, Tom, making a decision relative to taxation. I don't think, in my eyes, I don't think it's legal, so you can, you know, answer that or question it or whatever, but that's where I sit on some of this. I'm for taxes and all that stuff, but.
I just don't want a single person monopolize. If others have opportunity to speak, and I'll be happy to address your questions, I think we can, you know, rightfully let you to continue on, but I just don't want to, you know, cut into other people's opportunity.
Okay. What?
Well, I was just gonna say that the timing on this, the staff is been working on this since probably February of this year. And when Jonathan passed away, I became the acting county executive. So I wanted to bring it out into the public and start talking about it. Because if you see the $17 million, that's a lot of money that we would have. That would be a lot of positions. And every department would be hit. The snow plowing, sheriffs, jail, the court system, the things that we do as a county, and human services. And then also the support staff, finance, human resources, treasurer's office, clerk's office, elections. That would all been affected in 2025. So they were, I would say they were pretty much like 90% done at the time when I walked in there, and with how they were going to lay this out. And that's why we brought it out in August.
And a few other things that I can touch on. So first, just on that point of the timing of it and the fact that there had been some consideration of this for some time, going back, I don't know how many years, 7 years might be accurate. What Jonathan told myself and other members of the cabinet really from day one, he had given an interview with the Journal Times. I think it was when he was running for county executive or shortly after he took office, and the question was asked because at that time Racine County was one of perhaps 6 or 7 counties that didn't have a sales tax. Is what's your position on a county sales tax? And the way Jonathan responded to that, and he would remind us of this often, was he said that I'm not supportive of a county sales tax unless and until we've exhausted every other option, until we've used every tool in our toolbox, because he does not want to enact a 0.5% sales tax unless if it was absolutely necessary. And so, sure, there was some consideration of it, but it was only until we had exhausted every other means of preserving and maintaining critical services. And I think that's what Racine County did over the years, notwithstanding the fact that we're extremely a frugal county. You look at the Green Book, which tracks spending per county per capita on various issues, health and human services, notwithstanding the fact that we provide some of the best human services in the state of Wisconsin. We are 72 out of 72 counties in per capita spending in health and human services. In highway, we are 71 out of 72 counties. And so I like what you said, Mr. Ollander, in terms of the gold standard. That's absolutely right. I think it rightfully should be a source of pride that Racine County has made it to this point while maintaining critical services and providing these services at a really high level without resorting to a 0.5% sales tax. Gold standard is a good way of referring to it, but there comes a tipping point. I'm afraid we're at that point right now where further avoidance of the 0.5% sales tax is going to cut into our delivery of services. And so when you said that you'd like to see other counties coming our way, there's not a single county of the 69 counties that have enacted a 0.5% sales tax that has gotten rid of it once they enacted it. And maybe that's bad governance, maybe that's irresponsible spending. I'll grant you that's probably the case in some instances as it relates to some spending, but Racine County has been able to successfully deliver high levels of services without this tool. But we've exhausted every other tool in our toolbox, and we're now at that point where we have to give serious consideration to this if we're to provide or continue providing this high level of services. You touched a little bit on just, perhaps emphasizing too much or relying too heavily on potential, savings within the sheriff's office. You'll see on the slide right there of the cuts needed by department, 17 million. So the sheriff's office, in terms of its impact on the general levy, it's roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of criminal justice in the sheriff's office and other services. So between 2/3 and 3/4 of the levy is covered by those types of services. And there aren't nearly as many grant opportunities or alternative funding opportunities in those critical service areas as there are in some other areas. I mentioned that I oversee our child support services. For every dollar that we spend in child support and in ensuring that children, get the financial services or support that they need, for every dollar, 2/3 of that is coming from outside of the county. It's from state and federal funding. Human services is very similar for that, where it's not dollar for dollar, where it's coming off of the levy at the same impact as the sheriff's office. We get a great deal of our funding for our human services from outside of the county, from state and federal funding. And so, of course, there would need to be across the board reductions. It wouldn't solely be on the sheriff's office back. That would be catastrophic in and of itself. But when you look at the totality of it, we don't use the word catastrophic lightly, but that's essentially what it would be when you're talking about reducing these critical services to such a significant and draconian level. The community would feel those impacts, and that is the second option. There is no third option. Avoiding it means $17 million worth of reductions in this next year budget. There's no third option. You mentioned that perhaps the next county executive, may actually want to take advantage and take more. They couldn't. We are limited by law. The only county sales tax that can be enacted for any county that's not named Milwaukee is a 0.5% sales tax. It can be no more, and it can be no less if a county chooses to enact a county sales tax. So
Can it be temporary?
it could be temporary.
We looked at that as an option?
We explored that. We've had discussions with PFM, that's our financial advisor, and they have urged us to not give serious consideration to that, because the rating agencies, and rating agencies matter because counties borrow money. That's how we fund a lot of our capital projects. We enjoy a very favorable rating, but the rating agencies were told by our financial experts, our financial advisors, that if they see we've enacted a county sales tax and we rely upon that in part for maintaining these critical services that could be funded through the property tax levy, that will lead to an erosion of confidence by the rating agencies and could potentially, make it more expensive to borrow money. And who's paying for that is county residents.
Michael?
If we're rated like number one, I don't see where that would be an issue. But can you touch up on the legality of this going down? Because that's what I really want to know. I think the new director, which is gonna happen in a few months, that should fall under his bailiwick, and he decide. And
What I can say is
the legality question I'd like an answer on is, can you
It is
really
legal. That's
take
the
a vote
answer.
without a supervisor
Yes,
in the
absolutely.
district? Really?
It absolutely accords with state statute.
Not an absentee supervisor, not an excuse.
There have been multiple
vacancy.
occasions where there are vacancies, and the state law is clear on this, of what the process is for filling those vacancies. It could be a special election, or it could be by appointments of the county board chair and the approval of the county board, but there's not a set time period. And I'll let the county board chair speak on this, and I don't know that we should necessarily feel the need to address this one issue today, but there's a number of pressing issues that we were dealing with, and we have representation just to my right. in Mr.
Just one
Roundhouse.
second, we're just gonna limit it to
Okay.
the sales tax, okay, Ed? Like Supervisor
Yeah,
Horst-
well, I was going to say that keeping it on point here for others to be able to share their thoughts, because it is a listening session, so let's not turn it into a session about the one. Ed, stick around, we'll talk more, but I did want to put some context to this though too, because currently we have 1,065 employees in Racine County. So we're talking about the potential of eliminating 156 positions out of that, which is, give or take, you can do the math yourself. I mean, that's almost 18–19%. Here's the bigger number. I believe the police department, the sheriff's department, has roughly 325 current members in the sheriff's and in the jail. We're talking, I believe it's 90 or 91 positions would potentially go away because of what you see over there on the numbers. So we start talking about issues like this, and we want to keep it in perspective. Nobody wants to do any of this, but the reality is, those are what the numbers represent. And I think to think there's something else that's going to get us there would probably be a little naive and probably take us away from where the point is that we have to be looking right now, which is, we're talking about how do we get $17 million? Because one of my notes, and these gentlemen have all heard it, is that $17 million with what we're talking about with half a point, half a percent, excuse me, is basically just getting whole. That's all it's doing, is getting whole for us. Meaning, we'll pick up roughly 20 million or a little bit more in year one. So we've still got more work to do on our end, but we need to start now, because pushing it off down the road, unfortunately, puts us in that hole right there to come up with a way to try to eliminate that $17 million deficit.
The problem with that is that at the supervisor meeting, and everybody knows it, inflation has hit everybody hard. Everybody. Nobody is immune to it. Now, if that goes down and you make that permanent, and every tax that's ever come out, I've never seen anybody eliminate.
Sure.
Other than a temporary tax. So, if we get a leader in this country that all of a sudden inflation comes down and then now we got surpluses,
The rate would go down.
now what? Now,
The
a
rate,
lot
the
of
rate
people
would go,
suffered.
the rate would go down, but we're still gonna have some type of inflation. Even in a slow economy, you have a small inflation. And that's kind of where we get with this here. It, you know, right now, you have this kind of inflation, right? For the last, since 2008, before, we didn't have that much inflation. Heck, you could get loans at 3.5%, 4%. You know, it's come down a little bit, and that's good, but you're always gonna have a little bit of inflation. You know, so it's kind of a creep. More wages, asphalt costs more, electricity costs more, everything just keeps going up for the county. And that's kind of what you're seeing right there. We've been really, really smart. The first thing that really happened that you pay attention to is Act 10. Took half of the retirement, put it back into the operating, because the employees were paying for it. We've made adjustments to our health insurance. We sold Ridgewood, which was dragging it down.
A nursing.
We had a nursing home. We had really good economy. And then we had the ARPA funds. And now everything's catching up to us from being conservative budgeters for the last 20 years. So
So Ed, here's what we're gonna do. If there aren't any questions, if you have more, then we'll come back to you, okay? Is that fair?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna make one comment, as long as Supervisor Hoare brought it up. We're estimated in the full year to generate $20 million. As Michael said, about 25% or $6 million of that will be paid by out-of-county residents. So we're $6 million of that 20 million is not even coming out of your pocketbook, so. Who's next? Go ahead, please, state your name, please.
I'm Karen McNeil. I've been a property owner in the town of Waterford for the last 30 years. And I understand that part of the sales tax revenue would go for tax relief. I am strongly opposed to a sales tax. First of all, because it's regressive. It inordinately puts a burden on the least of us who have resources. I do not want my neighbors who have less than I have to be in a position to struggle to pay more taxes so I can have relief. I'm strongly opposed to that. Secondly, there are other revenue streams. Now, I understand by state legislature that more wealthy opportunities for revenue have been exempt, like valuable farmland, business properties. I would much prefer effort be put into correcting that so that a revenue stream could come from those who are most able to pay for it. I appreciate having this listening session. I commend the county on all of what they have done to maintain the services and the diligence in keeping a good budget. But I think that it's not completely appropriate or honest to say that this deficit will result in cuts and can only be corrected by a sales tax. I don't believe that. Now, and I only know what I hear and read, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. But I would strongly encourage you to look at other revenue streams. I don't deny that there is a deficit, but I am strongly opposed to the sales tax.
Thank you.
Okay, Diane, just a little bit. What you're all talking about is state legislation. Farmland, the
Yes.
farm ag use came in about 20 years ago, and that would have to change. You'd have to talk to your representative. Along with, in the future, they haven't done it yet, but they're gonna be taking personal property off the tax rolls also. And that'll come back to the local municipalities as a credit. And, so we're only allowed to tax whatever you purchase down at the hardware store that you pay a sales tax on. That's the only thing that we would be covering with the sales tax.
To what extent is there any legislation that affects how my personal property tax is assessed? Does the county have any jurisdiction over
That's
property taxes in the county that could provide a revenue stream? Why are we talking about property tax relief?
It's actually debt service release, which comes through the property tax.
And you realize we're limited about how much we can tax, to answer your question.
I have no clue what.
They call it levy limits, and a year or two ago, whatever that number levy limits, just as an example for conversation, all we could raise the taxes, our levy in the county would equal giving our 1,056 employees a 1% raise. That's all the money we could increase our levy. And that says nothing about servicing all the other costs we have. So to answer your question, the state restricts on how much we can property tax year-wide.
Are you saying then that my property tax is at a level that the state would not allow an increase?
Correct.
I'm taxed at the highest level I can be taxed given state law?
You're
Yes.
taxed at a level that is set
By the state.
numerous different taxing districts.
Then why, in all
Let me
of
finish,
this
ma'am. Let me finish,
information,
ma'am.
do you say that the sales tax is going to give a property tax relief?
It's gonna be, we're gonna use some of this property tax, or the sales tax for debt service. There's two pots of money we have. We have the operations and we have the debt. Now, the county could go wild and put a lot of debt service. So can the towns and the village here. That's not capped. What's capped is how much we can raise the operational levy by net new construction, how many houses they build and how many businesses. Now, the county is at about 1.5 net new construction percentage, which that equates out to about $800,000. And I'm not sure what the town or the village are, but that's the only thing you can take. Our property taxes that we receive on the property tax roll is about $50 million. We have about $9 million in debt service. That's what goes on the property taxes for what the county would put on your tax bill across the county.
We couldn't tax you more if we wanted to.
We couldn't tax you any more on that.
We're limited. Sir?
It was answered, thanks.
Oh. Hey, anyone else? Anyone else?
Any other comments? Again, this was the listening session for us to listen. Terry?
I just want to add something. I understand what you're saying about your neighbors who maybe not be able to afford things, but it looks like from what's exempt from the sales tax are things that would be the necessities that people would need, right? Prescription drugs, medical equipment, food, all those basic necessities. So I would think that these are just the extras that people don't have to go out and buy, right? It seems like the necessities are exempt.
Except
for
for clothing, we want everyone to be clothed.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely right. You see on the slide right here, and you'll get more detail in the FAQ document. I'd encourage you all to take a copy of that and read that, but you'll see an asterisk next to the fuel and electricity. That is tax exempt by state law in Wisconsin from its November to April. So in those heaviest use months, it's tax exempt, but we couldn't tax more if we wanted. We couldn't tax less, both in terms of the rate, but also in those goods and services. We've had that question come up a few times. Well, could you have a holiday during back to school shopping? And we're not allowed to do that under Wisconsin state law. Some states afford some leeway. You'll see in some of the panhandle states where, that during hurricane season, hurricane preparedness materials are tax exempt. We just don't have that flexibility under state law.
So one other question, is there anything that you've heard in any of your listening sessions that has changed anything in your efforts and plans going forward?
I mean, the county board, we have 20 people on the county board right now, and they'll ultimately be the ones who debate this and discuss it and will take action on it. We've had really good representation of our county board. So county board, when you look at the 6 different listening sessions, so it's ultimately something that they'll have to answer, but we've heard a lot of concerns about the amount of property tax reduction efforts. We've heard a lot of questions about, well, could there be a sunset? So, the effect that has will ultimately be up to the policymakers, but I think there's great value in them listening and hearing the feedback.
My point is, I would be willing to pay more property taxes if it meant that we didn't do this sales tax.
I'd like to answer your question directly, because
Thank
you
you.
said the county board supervisors, have we heard anything that has given us more information to make a decision or what have you?
Right.
I will personally tell you, I've now attended 3 of these sessions. And during those 3 sessions, what I have heard has been, whether you agree or disagree, has been, 1, a general acceptance that we can't afford to start cutting a sheriff's department to the numbers that we talked about, that we can't find ourselves without having some other sources of revenue stream to try to offset the deficit that you're looking at. And then the other thing that I found interesting, which was someone said too that, well, I don't disagree that the sales tax needs to be done. That's what they said, but I would expect there will be some form of balancing that will also be seen maybe on the expense side, so that it won't be 100% just on the revenue, but there will also be something on the expense side, because I made a statement a few moments ago that by doing this right now, it will only make us whole by offsetting 17 million. Our objective as a board has got to be, how do we set ourselves up for 26, 27 and beyond as it relates to running the county. So that has been, I mean, I've heard normal things also about, well, I'm not for taxes. We're already being overtaxed. And I think we all probably feel that way. I think we all feel that way. But this is a situation that we're addressing a very specific, urgent need. And I believe, Michael, there's a time frame on this, that if the decision doesn't get made by, is it November 1st or for the budgeting purposes?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be acted on in this budget in order for
Right.
us to balance our budget and approve that on November the 4th so that tax bills can go out before the holiday season.
And the downside to that would be if we don't move in this direction, or at least have some reasonable assurances on the expense side, that we have an obligation, we have to offset $17 million. So, when you ask a question, I wanted to give you a very specific answer, whether you agree or disagree or like or dislike. That's what I've learned in 3 listening sessions that I've been to. And by the way, they were in Norway, they were in Burlington, and they were here, which, Ed, I wanna point out one thing, all right? You say getting representation west of 94. Well, I think that's what we've tried to do here by making sure you've got listening sessions that are coming into our backyard here, whether it's Waterford or Burlington or Union Grove or Norway. So that has been a very conscious effort on the part of the board to make sure that we did that for representation purposes. I just wanted to make mention to your question as well.
Very commendable. I'm serious.
Thank you,
I mean, people need to be heard and, you know, all the way up to DC. It's like, anybody listening to the common man, common person? They sure don't seem like it. And let me make one thing clear.
Please.
I'm not
Michael,
I
thank you.
don't complain about the taxes that I pay.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, I go so far and I've lived in a few different areas throughout my life. I tell everybody, shut up, don't tell anybody outside Racine County
Sure.
what you pay for taxes. Because they're gonna go, what? So we were pretty good. I'm not speaking for the village, seems like every day.
Ed, would you,
there's
Ed, would you write that down for me? Would you agree to? So-
But what I, you know, we're not just talking out loud here amongst us, so nobody's asking questions, but I don't look at, you know, like this young lady said about her neighbor. If the good Lord took me right now, and I went up to St. Peter, and he said, hey, would you like to go back down again? You're gonna be 20 years old, you're gonna start life all over again. Well, I'd have to think about that. I knew what I had to go through growing up. And I'll tell you what, I don't admire envy these people, and because look at what we're getting hit with. And I'm just not talking about this, like I said, I think our taxes are fair. But I look at this picture here where people are struggling, especially young ones.
Yeah.
And look what's happening with the housing market. You talk about property taxes. I don't think people are realizing we're in for a bad storm when it comes to property taxes. It's going up, not if.
Ed, as usual,
Yes.
you have taken 2 to 3 minutes and turned it into 30.
And
Ed, no,
not only
hold on.
that though, but I got you guys to talk.
Hold on, I do wanna offer an opportunity, cause we're gonna keep this to 7 o'clock. Trish, I didn't know if you wanted to share any thoughts, or the sheriff, I'm coming to you next, just regarding obviously your backyard and the potential impact that this might have, depending on whatever decision gets made.
Sure, and I'm here not just on behalf of my office, because my office is pretty small when you look at that graph. But I'm also here to represent what we do in the courts, right? That's all state mandated. We have to have courts. People have their right to due process, but the state doesn't pay for it. And so each year, my numbers have gone up significantly, and it's disproportionate between misdemeanors and felonies. So my felony attorneys today have double the caseload they did when I started this job almost 30 years ago. And my misdemeanors have gone, they're double, but they're not as proportionate as the felonies. So we have to do more work with less. And the courts are doing more work with less. And every time we talk about one less clerk in the court system, what you have to remember is that we're all interrelated. So if we have less clerks and releases don't get to the jail in a timely fashion for someone who's in jail, we just shift the burden of that to the sheriff. Because then we pay another night for somebody to be in jail. So it's like this complicated web because we're all interrelated. If I don't have enough people to get criminal complaints filed with the court each morning, and I'm really proud of myself, in Milwaukee County, you can go to jail and they'll file paperwork behind the scenes and you could sit a week before you get a decision. The law says 48 hours and we pretty much hold to that. Because I know that every night that I'm trying to make up my mind, Chris is paying more money for somebody to stay in jail. And people's liberty is at stake. So we try really hard to keep up with the crush that we have, but because of the fact that it all comes back to one another, if you cut, you know, maybe they'll have fewer cases if there's fewer deputies, and maybe I'll have fewer cases to file, so I'll need less secretaries that file those complaints every day. But in the end, you have to decide, do I want to take away my safety and protection on the road, in our homes? You know, part of this plan that the county is devising, we have got to replace our 911 center. We are to a point where if you're gonna call 911, it's not gonna work. When we bought it, what year was that? We consolidated services to make all of the county under one dispatch center to save everybody money, saves the town money. At the beginning, the town paid an amount of money and it's gone down over the years, and eventually now we're gonna pick that up, right? So when you're talking about our 911 system, it was antiquated when we bought it. We can't get parts to fix things. And it's a critical service that we've got to replace. So for example, we are not even using, we're still using, what is it, analog. We don't have digital. The reason you can pull up the sheriff's department right now dispatch on an app is because we don't have the technology to create a system where you can't hear that, even in an emergency. So for example, the city of Racine, I don't know where they get their money from, but they bought the digital. And so they're on a different system in terms of what people can hear than we are. So what we need to do is make sure that we're keeping those systems up to date, because when someone's having a heart attack, you don't want that call to not go through. And so all of these things kind of get interrelated with one another. And when you look at these cuts, one thing I guess I just want to put out there that I've been to, this is my 5th listening session. When we talk about things like levy and we talk about things like debt service, I'm not a financial person, that's why I went to law school. I don't do the numbers. So I figured out for myself that levy means my monthly operating expenses. And debt service is my mortgage, my car payment, right? So for Chris, for example, he borrows money on a loan to replace squad cars, to buy equipment that they need on the dive team to make sure that we can respond to someone who's in the water, for example. The percentage we're talking about here is his operational costs, right? So just like your gas tank is more expensive to fill, so are theirs. And they run those cars 24 hours a day. So for Chris's budget to go up, because gas, things like gas are more expensive, it has to come from somewhere. And so we are to the point where we used reserves, we used the funds that came from COVID, and now it's kind of coming time to pay the piper and catch that up. In addition, we have to put some money away, or no one will loan us money to buy new squad cars or to buy a new 911 system. So we're behind the 8 ball. There's no question. We enjoyed a lot of years with no increase. And the legislature says, last year in Racine County, we had $800,000 of new construction, okay? New homes that were built in the county. So, I'm sorry, it probably costs more than that.
$100,000 of money.
We can add $800,000 to our portion of your property tax. Now, remember, when you look at your bill, you got schools, you got your municipality, you have us, Gateway. The portion that comes to the county, which, what is it, 45%?
It's about, the counties is run, depending upon what district you're in, is about
Yeah.
18 to 20%.
18, I'm sorry, I was off of that. We can raise that by $800,000, but it's not gonna get us 17 million. And that's the absolute limit of what we can do.
Yeah.
And if we don't do the things that we are proposing in our budget, things like services, mental health services, police services, no one's gonna come here and build a house. So that'll be the end. We can only increase based on new home construction. Does that make more sense to your question from before?
Well, it makes sense, except that everything goes up. So when you say you need more money and you're gonna take it from
Right.
me, where do I get it from?
It's true. It's true.
I ain't got any, I don't have any recourse of getting any more money.
Right, especially if someone who's not working in
That's
the
why
workforce anymore.
regressive taxes are not equal, fair, or just.
Fair enough.
I agree.
By the way,
I have a lot of feelings about how we should do taxes, but
Sheriff,
this is
if-
where we're at.
I want to give you the chance also to
Yeah.
say a couple.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And I agree with you. Listen, I have a family, been married to my beautiful bride, known her since I was 17 years old. So I understand what you're talking about when it comes to taxes, and I'm a very conservative individual. I've been your sheriff, oh my goodness, I've been with the county for almost 30 years, and I've been your sheriff for almost half of that. Bob Miller is here. He's been one of our supervisors that I always look to as sort of a mentorship when I was presenting my budget from the sheriff's office. So I'm almost into my 15th budget now, and I've been part of that belt tightening. I've been part of the lean government and all the other fancy terms they've given it. I've seen early on, at 22 years old, out of college, jumping in, working undercover narcotics, right here in your community, buying cocaine and marijuana and all the other things, working investigations for a decade, handling death investigations, speeders, drunk drivers, domestic violence, homicides, you name it. I've been part of a lot of those things. So I've seen the worst of people, and I've seen the great things that Racine County has. And we should be proud that we're in Racine County. I am very proud to say where we're at. I talk to the 72, well, I'm 72 of 71 other sheriffs, but I meet with them routinely. And I see some great things that happen throughout our state and across the country. And I also see some really horrible things. But every time I get to say, hey, I'm from Racine County, this is how we do business. I take great ideas back, and sometimes I push some great ideas their way, and vice versa. So I'm really proud that we've held our taxes where they're at. I never thought of before this community saying that three-letter word, tax. I hate it. However, I also am a realist. I know there's only so much belt tightening I can do at home. I can cut back on this, that, and the other thing, but eventually, if I don't pay my mortgage, guess what? The bank takes my house back. If I don't pay for my truck, guess what? They're gonna come repossess my truck, and Chris has nothing to say about that other than pay my own bills. So I get that. I'm a realist. I get it. I struggle when I walk through the gas station, but I look at what's exempt. My prescription drugs, my medical equipment, my food, all this stuff. I'm fine with that. But one thing I wanna know is at nighttime, if I'm not at home and my wife has someone beating down the door, that somebody like me is gonna go there and do damage for her, right? If my child ends up in a car accident or something bad happens, I want to know if there's someone there from 911 to somebody like me to come there and take care of that. I've lived my life about finding problems and developing solutions, right? So when I looked at this budget, I looked at it, I'm like, okay, what solution can I come up with? I worked with Jonathan before he passed last year. I'm like, okay, let's cut 3 deputies. We had a very robust conversation, Jonathan and I. I did not want to do that. I felt that. You guys didn't feel it at all. I felt it. I had to cut back on certain things. I had 3 less deputies on the street, 3 less people taking calls for service, 3 less deputies answering the phone, all the rest. We made it work. I'm not happy with it, but we made an agreement that we're gonna have to get that back. And now I'm looking at 90-some positions within my organization. I felt the 3 positions. I promise you, and I hate this conversation. I truly do. I hate this. I was called a bully for bringing this up. Seriously, I was. I was told, well, it's either this or that. The sheriff's a bully. Listen, I'm a realist. If you don't pay something, if I don't pay for the deputies or the correctional officers, they're not going to be there. They're going to go reach for the hills, and they're going to go work for Kenosha, Waukesha, Walworth, any other county but us. I work really hard to recruit the best people that show up at your door when you need us. I work very hard for that. And I'm telling you right now, my staff feel this conversation. They know that. And they're very concerned about their jobs, as you all would be if your job was on the line tomorrow. So they're looking at, well, is Kenosha hiring? Is Waukesha hiring? Is Walworth hiring? Where else should I go other than Racine? Because they obviously don't feel us. I'm like, no, listen, you're appreciated. We're having these conversations, but stick with us. I'm very concerned about losing 90 positions. Not selfishly. I have taken an oath to protect you. I've taken an oath to defend you. And I do that with pride, and I'll do that till I'll put my life on the line for you. But I can't do that if I don't have the money and to hire the staff. And I'm not just talking any staff. A lot of people that want to work with me, I won't hire. Because I don't want them showing at your house. I don't want them showing up at my house. So I want good quality people showing up that know what the heck they're doing, right? That if Michael is here to tell you about the liabilities we have, I get sued often. That's why I have good training, high quality equipment, the best that's known, so I can deliver the finest services so that when the bad thing happens, you can go, well, Chris, you did everything you could, your team did everything they could, as opposed to, well, we're short-staffed and we had this or that. Sorry, we have a 15-minute response time when it should have been 5.
Will you take a donation?
We would love that. Do you have $17 million? We'd love that. You'll solve all our problems. So I want to keep it at 7 o'clock here, but this is a listening session. I wanted to be the person that just sat here and listened. However, it's also important to say, hey, this is what I need. And I hate this, you either do this or this happens, but that's where it's at. Folks, that's where we're at right now. If we don't have this assistance from our community, and listen, I don't want to pay 10 cents more for my pizza on a Friday with my wife, but at the end of the day, so is the guy from Kenosha, so is the guy from Waukesha, Walworth, Milwaukee, who comes into our community and enjoys all of our services. They crash up on our interstate system, my guys are out there. These are the people that are traveling through our community, they're enjoying our services, let them pay. I heard 25%, let them pay their fair share, right? I don't want to pay anything more, but at the end of the day, I want to enjoy freedoms of my own home. I want to know when a bad thing happens that somebody's going to come there and help me. It's not about getting my trash picked up on Wednesdays. It's not about, making sure I'm safe when I go to church or stand in the grocery store. I want to make sure that everything is safe in our community. It's not about me, it's about all of you. So at the end of the day, I'm glad we're all here. We're having this very, very robust conversation. But, Jonathan said it best last year. He said, the check engine light is on. And everyone kind of looked at him like, like my dog looks at me. I'm like, no, listen, that means something. We have tightened the belt. Honestly, people are like, you can only do so much, but the check engine light has been on for some time now. It has been on for some time. And Jonathan said it best, check engine's on, what are we going to do? I'm like, what do you want me to do? Send my guys up for more speeding tickets? Someone said, well, we should cut back on copy paper. Okay, wow. Yeah, that's how we're gonna get to that number, right? I mean, let's be real, folks. I'm not ripping on anybody who has, listen, I like the idea of having small cuts here and there where we can, but we're beyond that at this point. I've seen 30 years of this county doing more with less. And today, as Mr. Rollhouse has said it best, this is where we're at. This is the bottom line. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't need it.
So the bottom line for me is that I want